Overnight we sank into mud, we could not move forward, and we also lost contact with the enemy. The vehicles were struck fast, the wheeled guns were pulled out of the mud by our artillerymen with difficulty, and they were covered in mud up to the ammo boxes. A few days later a cold wave struck overnight and it chilled everything. With difficulty we overcame this new inconvenience. We didn't move any faster than before, we crawled. This is the way it went, day in, day out. The front line was wherever the attack ended at dark. Often this was in an open field and in -20-degree weather. And here is where my story begins. A pitch-dark night, chattering cold, open field. Suddenly there is a blazing fire of a great size on the horizon. We are magically drawn to this location and we sense its warmth. And not only us. From all directions streamed the frozen forms of friend and foe. And I must elucidate. When we captured Taganrog, winter clothing from a Russian depot fell into our hands. Blue wool coats, felt boots, and fur caps with Soviet stars on them. These we substituted with the death's head, sometimes not. And so we looked essentially like Russians. The blazing fire was from 3 huge stacks of baled straw from a collective farm, which someone lit to warm themselves. We are standing around the fire, warming ourselves for half the night, glowing in the front, freezing in the rear, rotating at times. It was a macabre joke from some campfire story. For the rest of the night we crawled into the undisturbed straw bundles. Like bees in a hive, we bored adjacent holes in the bundles. Soon we noticed that there were more fur caps with Soviet stars around them. We knew these were genuine Russians. However, we were too weak and too tired to think about it. We had been together for a surprisingly long time. Then we slept peaceably together. On the next morning we gathered up our sleeping comrades, several dozen, and moved off to the west, homeward. Not a shot was fired, no hatred was displayed, no anger. The cold made everyone equal. War can also be human, so peaceful. Welcome back to the 28th video in the War in the East series. That is a very compelling, stirring section in Army Group South, the Wehrmacht in Russia, 1941-1945, as mud season turned to the bitter cold of the approaching winter. There is so much compelling reading in this book. You really are inspiring. I have another section here I'd like to read down the road about the siege of Sevastopol and the very descriptive accounts of the massive assemblage of heavy artillery and those very specific field artillery pieces. All right, so let's get a situation report. We'll move on north, get up into Army Group North's area of operations. We came to the determination that there was no real purpose in continuing to attack north towards Tallinn in this sector of Army Group North. Is just too many Soviets, too many strong Soviet formations before us. More than likely we'd have been able to make progress, but it would have been inching progress at great cost. I do not want to waste men and material and time attacking the Soviets here for very little gain. Same can be said for the stretch of front from Pskov all the way down to Veliky Luki. We are in a little bit of a pursuit of the Soviets in this sector of the front, as we are both exchanging blows each opportunity we had for each other to attack. So I called that off and I just reorganized my divisions and formed a straight line along this part of the front, no longer attacking. Again, there was no point. It does not contribute to any other cause along any part of the front from north to south. So for now, they are going to reconstitute, regroup, and replenish their supplies and await further orders. Well, let's just take a pause and look at this build up. Massive concentration of Soviet forces in this elbow of the front, right south of Veliky Luki. And we talked about before that it's very hard to get to these Soviets. It's aching. This concentration is aching to be encircled. There's no real easy way to accomplish that. So we just have to sit here and observe this concentration and be wary of what they may try to do against Army Group Center's northern flank. So this is what it looks like after the second week of the offensive. The main axis of advance, we increased the depth of our penetration in the Soviet lines, again at great cost. The Soviets are defending far, far more doggedly than I had hoped. It's really been a chore to make any progress. The Soviets hold more often than not in our attacks. Fort levels, we looked at this in the past. What I wasn't aware of is that once a unit remains in place in that hex for a duration of time, you start to fortify that position. I erroneously thought that once the division that was fortifying itself moved out of that hex, the terrain would revert back to its natural state, but when you think about it, that's not really realistic. So fort levels remain after you have cleared out. So almost organically, a division here can construct its own defensive line by just remaining stationary for a number of turns, which abstracts that it's digging in, it's improving its positions, foxhole improvement, fortifying, getting the lay of the land, and creating engagement areas. All this is represented by these fortification levels. So silly me, I thought that once we dislodged the Soviets and made some gains and ruptured their front and got them retreating and withdrawing, that we would deny them these fortification values. But that's not the case. There was a belt, a defensive belt. What could we name it? What would the Soviets name this defensive belt that they established all along the front, literally from north to south, by fortifying, by remaining in place, that the Germans had to get through? We started south of Smolensk, and the Soviets, these may degrade over time, I'm not sure. I'll have to keep an eye on that. But the Soviets, as we pushed them back and made them retreat, they just fell back on fortified positions. So it's been an incredibly arduous effort to make these gains. With all that being said, we still made some gains. And we are 110 miles from Moscow, with no perceivable Soviet defenses in our way. It's true that our leading panzer divisions and our motorized division here, who are they? Who are these brave souls? 16th Motorized and the 11th, 11th Panzer Division, very nice, are leading the way. Their support is considerably far away to really capitalize on this puncture through the Soviets' front. But we're going to try and move as fast as we can to get through here and push our infantry up and through. The Soviets conceded Smolensk. We were able to take Smolensk uncontested. And then with some hard fighting, we're able to encircle the Soviets from the north and the south, crossing the Dnieper, this small tributary of the Dnieper before it becomes a grand river. So we crossed the Dnieper, moved north, linked up, and we encircled a small group of Soviets, some corps level formations. Even though there's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 formations in here, the corps level, they have up to 30,000 troops per corps formation. 5, 6, those are 7 divisions that will not be making it back to the front. This straggling infantry corps here that was holding out well. Did we attack into there? I don't think. I think we just bypassed. Yeah. We learned our lesson attacking these infantry corps in the woods, in wooded terrain, in swamp terrain. So we bypassed. Unfortunately, we are coming abreast to the Bulva River, and once again we have to make one of these innumerable river crossings that the Soviets so artfully happen to withdraw to the other side. So this is going to be very difficult. However, we're north of the Bulva River, so we can attack down and make some progress here and break out. We have the makings of another smaller encirclement here, but the southern axis of advance is more than likely, well, I can predict now it's not going to get over the Bulva in time to meet up with the northern axis of advance. Moving south, the Italians moved up. Remember that the Soviets broke contact. We are now over the Sodost River as it moves down into the Desna, where the Soviets again are using the river to their great advantage. The Soviets have this 10-mile width part of their front that's sticking out like a finger. We tried to encircle the Soviets here, but it was just far too difficult to dislodge these Soviets right here. A number of attacks, 4 of them actually, and the Soviets would not budge. We brought to bear considerable combat power against them, but the Soviets are just defending fanatically in places, and they will not be moved. So this is a bit of a failure to encircle some of these formations here the Soviets have. We did attack at one point a little bit to the north here, and we had hoped the Soviets would retreat due east, but instead they retreated north and east, and that contributed to us unsuccessfully making this encirclement. I expect we'll be able to destroy at least a few of these formations in the next turn, but not all of them. What I want to do is look at what we can do with this natural part of the Soviets' front where we can consider some encirclement opportunities. To achieve that, I was thinking of bringing down one of our uncommitted Panzer Corps to this sector and capitalize on this thinner part of the Soviets' front to assist the 2 Panzer Corps now conducting operations here. But unfortunately, we have advanced past our railheads, and these panzer divisions of the Panzer Corps are sitting on damaged rail lines, and it's a little bit of a ways back. I'll show you what I'm talking about. It would be the 24th Panzer Corps commanded by who else? Hermann Bulk. I hate to leave Hermann Bulk idle, but in this part of the front, there's not much they can accomplish. At best, pushing back 4 to 5 Soviet divisions over the Bulva, and then what? There won't be any momentum left and combat power left to make a bridgehead over the Bulva, and then they're stuck in with nowhere to go. No operational freedom by committing them here. Expend fuel and movement factors to commit them by the next week. They will arrive around this area south of the penetration into the Soviets' front, but they won't be able to really contribute until the following week while burning precious gas. So I have to think about what I'm going to do with the 24th Panzer Corps. We may move them south over down to the west bank of the Sudat and then using their combat power, force a bridgehead over this part of the river, and then threatening to encircle this section. The only complication there is, once again, it's just my imagination or not, the Soviets, the rivers seem to be perfectly placed for the Soviets wherever I look for them to defend behind. Maybe it's just sheer statistics when we look at the incredible amount of rivers the Germans have to cross during their advances to attack north as forming a southern pincer. If we did move the 24th down to this area, we would have to cross another river against very strongly defended forces. I'm hoping that the threat to the north will have them retreat east to establish a more contiguous defensive line. If not, and they decide to attack, it may prove to our advantage once we finish up this small pocket. Our 2 active Panzer Corps here could attack south and get in behind this massing of Soviet tanks. Another isolated Soviet corps, a cavalry corps, hanging out in Cherkasy, not wanting to give it up. Not much positive results here south of Kirovograd. The 11th Army and 3rd Panzer Corps have made advances, just pushing the Soviets back. What was their fort level? Yes, they had some fortification levels we had to get through as well. Throughout the mud season, those 3 to 4 weeks of mud, the Soviets have developed a nice defensive belt where they set up their positions. So what we're looking at is the end result of this turn. Successes here and there, potentially damaging successes, Soviets. It all is going to depend how they react to this. The Soviets do not have strong enough forces able to reach our stringed out panzer divisions here. From the north, from the south, these Soviet formations are just going to retreat east. They have no designs of attacking and trying to cause some havoc to our panzer divisions that are out on their own. They will retreat east, more than likely, sensing a potential encirclement. They should recognize that there's not going to be any progress to the south of them, so they could remain in place and continue to harass the southern flank of this puncture into the Soviets' line. We will have to adapt to what the Soviets do, how they react to this break in their lines. Ideally, they retreat in a little disarray and leave some of their divisions vulnerable for an encirclement in the next week. After we destroy these Soviet formations, and more than likely get 3, maybe 4 of these Soviet formations down here, we will have destroyed over 20 Soviet formations since the beginning of the German summer offensive. That's to include the 1 or 2 turns we had of clear weather in May, which quickly turned to mud. So fits and starts to this offensive. 2 contiguous weeks of solid ground in clear weather, we're able to achieve what we are looking at. How this develops and unfolds and ends up by September, October's time frame, I'm not overly optimistic at our progress right now. I have some confidence we will be able to do considerable damage to the Soviets, but will it be enough? Operationally, we have some opportunities in front of us. Strategically, too early to tell. The order of the day is to find and destroy Soviet formations where we can manage that, and to put ourselves at the end of the summer in a solid position, ready to conduct operations in 1943. Well, I'm back, and I'm an idiot. I had to step away, came back, thought I had resumed the recording, but I had not, and so I talked for about 20 minutes to myself with no recording to show for it. I executed the turn, Soviets' turn. So here we are. Let's get a situation report. What happened with the Soviets? We'll keep it short. Oh, it's probably good that you didn't hear my closing remarks once we saw the conclusion of the Soviets' turn, because can you imagine what I was presented with? Mud has reared its miserable, muddy head again. Take a look. Info screens. Central South Soviet zone is clear. North Soviet zone is mud. Which means perfectly, almost as if the Soviets have planned this with their weather control technology to create mud conditions on the ground exactly where our main axis of advance is taking place. It's just too convenient a pattern. It's not coincidence any longer. It's just a pattern that we're getting gummed up with mud whenever we start to commence this summer offensive in 1942. And I don't know what to do about this. This really puts us in a jam. This is a tight spot for the Germans. We are extended, really unable to maneuver ourselves out of this, whereas the Soviets will very conveniently have an entire week to calmly, at their leisure, enclose this penetration of their front. It's going to be even more difficult now looking at this. Well, what does this mean for the Germans? We still have the entirety of Army Group North to work with. We have solid ground, clear skies. Unfortunately, our plans did not involve Army Group North offensively. It was just going to be a defensive posture along the entire front of Army Group North, as we're looking at it here. We still have this encirclement we have to finish off, but it's mud, so that has to be postponed for a week. And the Soviets will be able to take advantage of that during their move and shuffle more forces into these breaches that we've achieved and really hinder any further progress during our offensive. There are some places where the Soviets have pushed through our lines. In this occasion here, also down here, where they had a favorable result, 330th Infantry Division had to retreat. And the Soviets just came abreast and dressed their lines. So it's an even front from the Tallinn region all the way down to Velikai Luki. This little gap we're going to have to take care of. Thankfully, it's not mud, so we'll finish off this core and then adjust accordingly. Moving south, the minor axis of advance we had going along the Bolvar River as we came abreast of that defensive line the Soviets have set up. We have some opportunity to continue to press that attack, but the northernmost sector of this attack is now within mud. And of course, it's perfectly set where we were on the east bank of the Bulva, able to attack down, and now we are unable to do that. Moving further south, no change really to the Italian sector, where our Italians are helping to bolster the lines. This is where it got very interesting. And I have to say, the movement and the attacks the Soviets conducted during their turn is the most advanced and successful I've seen to date in the war in the East. If you remember, the Soviets had formations built up here. We're wondering if they would come south over the Seman River. And also, there was a strong tank force here that the Hungarians were fronting, and that we were expecting maybe the Russians will take advantage of that and attack the Hungarians in this sector. But they did not. They pulled out and they moved north, and they made some attacks to push the Germans back. They had some success too. Retreated, held. There's two attacks. There should be two attacks. Oh, did we hold there? Okay, here's where we held. Yep. And then retreated, routed. They routed a German division. That is the second German division to be routed in the war so far. So they had some really good success. With the pressure from the south, these tank corps and brigades streaming north, along with that very strong force they had poised above us, we now have strong forces, strong Soviet forces to the north and south of us. So we're going to have to dig ourselves out of this. Thankfully, it is clear terrain, and we are able to attack ourselves out of this and let the Soviets cement their gains should there be mud, and we are not able to really maneuver or attack out of it. We're going to try and take advantage of their brazen attacks here. So let's move even further south. Soviets did mass up, did one attack here and one here, and then they fell back again. No real pressure. Just showing the Germans and the Axis miners here that they can attack and they will attack. And it's not all going to be, the ball's not going to be in the Germans' court the whole time here in the summer, which obviously has been the case. At least the weather certainly has not been in the Germans' court. So this is what the front looks like. After the third week in June and the third week of the summer offensive, which really, I won't even qualify this as a third week of the offensive because our major axis of advance with the bulk of our combat power is now quagmired in mud, perfectly where we were attacking. Look at that. Almost as if by design. We must deal with this. We must drive on. We must not let our spirits flag. The plan now is to simply not move. Fortunately, the silver lining coming out of this mud is that the Soviets won't be able to attack here and pressure anywhere here. They will be able to close in, and we can take a look that prior to the Soviets executing their turn, there were no forces really here. I think there was like 2 or 3 Soviet formations in front of our leading German panzers and Moscow, and now there are, and by the next turn there'll be more and more. So no action taken here except to airdrop supplies, rest and recuperate in the mud, if that is any silver lining at all. No action here to finish off the Soviets in this small pocket. We definitely have to take steps with this developing here as well as here, and the exciting part will be in this location. How can we make the Soviets pay for their actions here? We'll definitely move the Hungarians up to come abreast to deny these Soviet tank divisions complete freedom of maneuver, and we will continue to try to get the upper hand with 11th Army and 3rd Panzer Corps and the Romanian Axis Minor allies. Let's talk overall strategy. With the mud being this unknown variable that we cannot discount in any planning moving forward, maybe I had it in the back of my mind. Maybe I was just thinking that, well, we've had some poor luck with this random weather. At least we'll get maybe a month, 6 weeks of solid ground, clear weather in a row, but that was not the case. With this new development with the mud, there's nothing we can capitalize on now with the success we had with this complete rupture of the Soviets' line and getting past that organic defensive line that they've established. Looking at the fort levels, yes, we're through it. There's no longer fort levels here. There's still up here in the shoulder, nice fort level 2s to be seen. What it's going to mean is that Soviets have another week to recover and react to our offensive. Meanwhile, we can do nothing. I'm giving serious consideration of altering the shape of operations in Army Group Center's area of operations, to the extent of pulling out some Panzer Corps, railing them down, and taking advantage of what I believe to be massive concentrations of Soviet forces ripe for the picking. There's far more freedom of maneuver for our Panzer Corps, wide open spaces, and this part of the front is just so much more favorable for encirclements. Is it too late in the game? Has the die been cast? The horse is out of the barn. Right now it looks that way, but with a week of clear ground, we can gracefully exit from this offensive and take advantage of any opportunities as we shift focus maybe to the south. Maybe an incorrect thought. We don't want to throw in the towel now with this offensive in Army Group Center's area of operations. But with the mud setting in right now, very likely there could be another turn of mud after this. But if I remember correctly with the random weather table, I think there was the language that there will be no more than one mud turn from somewhere late June to somewhere late September. However, the language also stated per Soviet zone. So there's a likelihood that we could have a no more than one mud turn in the Soviet center zone, which right now it's the North Soviet zone. We could have one turn of mud in the center Soviet zone and one turn of mud in the South Soviet zone. So if that happens, then where a lot of our combat power is arrayed along that part of the front will be in mud. These are really considerations to think about, and as I go through the turn, I'm going to give it greater thought and look more closely at what it would look like logistically, how to maneuver out of this and take advantage of what we've achieved here, and then logistically, how to route our Panzer Corps and, in reality, a number of our infantry corps to build up enough combat power here to take advantage of these opportunities that I'm seeing. By nature of how 1941 ended, we had our Panzer Corps from Army Group South and Army Group Center mostly positioned in Army Group Center's area of operations, and because of the mud and my botched use of rail capacity, I was not able to shift infantry divisions and Panzer Corps behind our front to establish a assembly area for our attack divisions. I'm going to end the video here. Apologize for not capturing the content. A lot that can still happen from now until when the frost starts to hit. Well, first the mud season, and then the frost, and then the snows, and then the blizzard. A lot can happen still. Will we lose time? If we do, completely abandon any thought of advancing any further in Army Group Center's area of operations and seek to destroy Soviet divisions in the south? That might set us up better for 1943. Because let's be honest, at this stage in the game, for what we have accomplished in 1942 is not cutting it. So maybe now is the time to think about what we can do to position us for 1943. If we can have success in the south, that success being destroying Soviet formations, large amounts of Soviet formations, then that will be, I would say, a successful 1942 for the Germans, based off of coming out of the 1941 winter special rule that the Germans endured, and then the very unfavorable random weather that we encountered. We are going to end it here. Thank you for watching. This is First Fire Non-Assault Move out.